A man does not choose the era of his birth, but sometimes destiny chooses a mask far greater than the person wearing it behind the scenes. Kael was just a cowardly blacksmith, hiding from the world's chaos, never imagining that his life was about to be forged into something much more dangerous. A single scar, earned from a simple accident at the anvil, would soon become his most powerful lie and his greatest burden in the coming war. The kingdom was falling, its heroes dead or fleeing. In the midst of the smoke and screams, the people were desperately searching for a savior to follow. Stepping into the light, Kael held his old blade not out of courage, but because he had nowhere left to run from the encroaching darkness of fate. The soldiers knelt, mistaking the trembling blacksmith for the Slaughter King. He, a legendary warrior with a scar just like his, returned from the shadows to lead. He wanted to scream that he was a fraud, but the hope in their eyes was a cage. He had no choice but to play the part. And so the greatest lie in history began. A coward was dressed in gold, thrust into a war he never wanted, carrying a name not his. Within the heart of the command center, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of leather and iron. Kael felt like a lamb among starving wolves. Every eye was on him, searching for the wisdom of a master. Kael remained frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird in a cage. In the world of men, silence is often mistaken for strength. When you are drowning in fear, staying quiet looks exactly like the patience of a king. They presented him with impossible choices and complex strategies. Kael didn't understand the maps, but he knew the weight of the steel they carried. He realized that if he spoke, the illusion would shatter. So he simply watched, his mind a whirlwind of panic disguised as absolute, icy calm. The more he stayed silent, the more they respected him. They saw his lack of words as a sign that their petty squabbles were beneath his notice. Inside, he was a child lost in a storm. Outside, he was a pillar of stone. This is the first lesson. Your fear is your own business. Through the tent flaps, he saw the faces of those who believed in him. Their hope was becoming the hammer that would shape his new soul. The expectations of a nation began to mold him. He wasn't a hero yet, but he was starting to understand the power of his own image. Silence is the sharpest weapon of the weak. When you don't know what to do, don't move. Let the world project its strength onto your stillness. As the night deepened, Kael realized that he was no longer just a blacksmith. He was the anchor of an army that was ready to die. The transformation began in secret. Under the cover of night, he the coward became a student, devouring every piece of knowledge he could find about war. He began to see the battlefield as a forge. Armies were like raw iron. They needed heat, direction, and a steady hand to be shaped into victory. Confidence is a muscle that must be trained. He practiced the walk, the look, and the voice of a man who feared nothing but failure itself. He learned to speak in fragments. Short sentences leave no room for doubt. He gave the orders, and his terror remained hidden beneath a mask of steel. The army began to change. They felt the steady pulse of a leader they believed was invincible, and in their belief, they found their own courage. He used what he knew. While others saw strategy, he saw structural flaws. He knew which blades would break and which shields would hold under pressure. His blacksmith's eye became his greatest tactical advantage. He taught his men not just how to fight, but where to strike to shatter the enemy's resolve. Step by step, the lie was becoming a reality. He was no longer just pretending to be a general. He was beginning to think like one. Manhood is not the absence of fear. It is the mastery of it. Kael stood on the edge of the world, waiting for the final test. The enemy was coming, a wave of steel and hatred. The time for pretending was over. The time for the blacksmith to burn had arrived. He didn't see a terrifying army anymore. He saw a complex machine with moving parts that he knew exactly how to dismantle and break apart. His men looked at him and saw a god of war. They didn't know that their god was just a man who refused to quit. If the world needs a hero, you give them one. Even if your heart is screaming, you stand your ground and you lead them home. The world held its breath. Thousands of lives rested on the shoulders of a man who once hid in a cellar from his own shadows. The drums of war began to beat, a rhythm of death that echoed the pounding of Kael's own heart against his heavy iron breastplate. He was the first line of defense. If he turned back now, the kingdom would burn. The weight of his lie was now the weight of survival. Courage is not a feeling. It is a choice made in the moment of greatest terror. Kael chose to stay, for the people behind him. Chaos erupted. The battlefield became a meat grinder of iron and bone. Kael was swept into the center of the storm, blinded by the dust. Death was everywhere, screaming in the wind. Kael watched his men fall, and something inside him finally snapped under the immense pressure of the war. He saw his friend about to die. In that moment, the blacksmith's instinct to protect what he had built overcame his primal fear of death. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply acted. The coward died in that charge, and a warrior was born from the ashes of his fear. He swung his blade with the strength of a man who had spent a lifetime hammering iron. It wasn't graceful, but it was absolutely devastating. He fought like a demon. Every strike was fueled by the years of hiding, the years of shame, and the newfound need to protect his people. The enemies saw the scar and the fury in his eyes. They began to whisper his name in terror as they retreated from his path. He used the battlefield like an anvil, positioning his troops to crush the enemy against the hammer of his sudden, violent offensive maneuver. They would die for him, not because of the legend, but because they saw a man who was willing to bleed at the very front. The tide had turned. The impossible had happened. The underdog had broken the spine of the greatest army the world had ever seen. When backed into a corner, even the weakest man can become a giant. Not because he is fearless, but because he found something worth saving. The sun rose on a new world. The war was over, but the man who had started it was gone, replaced by someone entirely new. He didn't feel like a hero, while he felt the weight of every soul that didn't make it, a burden that only true leaders can understand. His hands were no longer just those of a smith or a soldier. They were the hands of a man who had shaped history itself. Taking off the mask was the hardest part. He was ready to tell them the truth, to go back to his forge and disappear into history. The man in the water was a stranger. The coward was dead, buried under the weight of his own sudden and unexpected greatness in the war. They didn't bow to the legend of the Slaughter King. They bowed to the man who had outthought and outfought everyone when the world was ending. They knew. They had seen his fear, and they had seen him overcome it. That was more valuable to them than any ancient, blood-soaked myth. A true general is not born from a victory. He is born from the moment he accepts the responsibility for the lives of those he leads. He had become the anchor of their hope. The role he had played for so long, had finally become his true and honest skin. He went back to where it all began. Not as a coward seeking shelter, but as a master returning to his roots with a new purpose. He re-registered the heat. But this time, he wasn't just forging tools or horseshoes. He was forging a new future for himself and his kingdom. He forged a blade for himself, not to kill, but to remind himself that he was the creator of his own destiny and his own honor. The scar no longer defined him. He didn't need a legend to prove who he was. The blacksmith had become the architect of his own soul. The battlefields have changed, but the struggle remains the same. Every man today is a blacksmith, standing before the fire of his own life. Don't wait for confidence to arrive before you start. Confidence is the reward for the work you do, while you are still shaking with fear. Choose a role that is bigger than you. Be the father who provides, the husband who protects, and the leader who takes the first step forward. War dress for the soul you want to have. Act with the integrity of the man you wish to become, and the world will eventually follow your lead. Master the art of silence. Accept the heavy weight of responsibility. These are the tools that will turn your raw potential into a lasting legacy. Action is the only thing that proves who you really are. Your character is forged in the moments when you decide to stay, despite the terror. One day, you will look in the mirror and realize you aren't acting anymore. The hero you were pretending to be has finally become the real you. So stand tall, keep your heart steady, and keep hammering. You are the master of your forge, and your greatest masterpiece is yet to come.